What if the safest place in the universe isn't silence, but nonsense? Not hiding, not turning the lights off, just being so loud, so chaotic, that anything dangerous looking for you gets bored and wanders off. It's a strange thought, isn't it? You and I spend so much of our lives trying to be clear, to make sense, to put things in order. But out there, between the stars, there might be something that hunts exactly that. Neat patterns, clean stories, proud signals that say, "Look how organized we are." Proud signals that say, "Look how organized we are." And if that's true, then the messy, glitchy parts of us, the jokes, the spam, the endless arguing online, might be doing a very quiet kind of work. I've always been fascinated by the idea that a whole planet could accidentally teach itself to act like a comedian playing the fool on stage, so nobody notices the locked door behind them. It really makes you wonder what our noise looks like from far away. Does it seem childish, sick, or does it look like a mask that never quite slips? So get cozy in whatever way works for you, because tonight's story steps into that question. We're heading to a station called Lyre Spire, where a tired records clerk named Jonah Pike notices a strange pattern in the last messages of Dead Worlds. 3 unsettling words they all managed to send before they went dark. Earth is acting. The universe was never empty. It listened, long before humans built rockets or screens. Something out in the dark had been listening for clean, steady patterns. The kind that only thinking minds make when they feel safe and proud. Over ages, whenever those patterns grew too clear, a light in the sky would go quiet and never turn back on. By the time humans reached the late 26th century, most species had learned to keep their signals neat and careful, like tidy rooms with everything in place. They thought this made them safe and smart. They liked clean networks, clean records, and clean stories about themselves. Earth did something different. Earth shouted. It laughed at itself. It argued in 1,000 languages at once. It played music over static, sent jokes that made no sense, and filled deep space with mixed-up noise that never settled into a simple shape. To outsiders, it looked clumsy and childish. To the Council of Signals, it looked like a hygiene problem. To the ruins scattered across the galaxy, it had meant something else. In their final days, as their cities burned out and their skies went dark, they all managed to send a short, strange warning that no one fully understood. Earth is acting. Centuries later, a quiet records clerk named Jonah Pike would sit in a narrow office on the Lyre Spire station, scroll through old scans from Dead Worlds, and notice that this same message kept turning up in the last surviving files. It sat there like a forgotten sticky note on the side of history, written by many hands in many styles, all trying to say the same thing before their lights went out. By then, Earth's signal had started to change in a way that no one had expected. Its noise was not only loud, it was aiming at something. And out in the dark beyond the bright lanes of ships and stations, something that fed on tidy patterns turned its attention, then slowly turned away again, bored by a world that never stopped acting like a joke. Lyre Spire drifted in calm orbit above a pale gas giant, a thin ring of lights and metal against a slow, swirling world of cloud. From far away, the station looked like a quiet mark on the sky, but inside it felt like a library had grown into a city and then learned how to breathe. The Council of Signals ran everything there. It had no armies, no proud fleets, and no flags. It had archives, listening shells, translation halls, and long rooms full of people and machines who watched the flow of information between stars. While other councils talked about trade or borders, the Council of Signals cared about patterns. It watched for strange shapes in data, for messages that might hurt minds, for stories that refused to die, and for signals that looked too neat for comfort. Clean lines worried them more than messy ones, because history had taught them to fear perfect order. The station's halls carried a soft, steady hum from the systems around them. Air moved at the same slow pace every day. Lights stayed at a gentle level that suited many eyes. Every corridor had small strips of color that guided visitors who did not yet know the paths, and every door opened with a controlled hiss when someone with access walked close. On most days, Savakor liked that kind of order. Sava's people came from a world of storms and shifting plains, and the controlled calm of Lyre Spire felt like a long, careful breath that never ended. Sava's tall, scaled form moved with an easy grace through the narrow walkways, eyes resting on the quiet glow of status bands around each door. Sava worked as a field analyst, which meant long months away from the station on small ships, scanning old ruins and signal scars, then short bursts of time back in the council's halls, trying to explain what those ruins had once tried to say. It was not a famous job, but it mattered to Sava. Every silent world was a question, and Sava had spent years trying to learn how to listen to answers that came late. On the morning that started the nuisance case, Sava stood in a briefing room with 3 walls of slowly shifting star maps. Lines of color showed known routes, beacons, and listening posts. Faint gray marks showed places where something had gone wrong in the past, and the council still did not fully know why. Director Amana Sorel stood at the front, hands behind their back, dark hair pulled away from a lined, calm face. Amana did not raise their voice. They did not need to. When they spoke, people listened, not out of fear, but because years of work had taught them that this person rarely wasted words. Sector reports are stable, Amana said. Eyes moving over the group, no large mimetic hazards, no active signal plagues, and no unfiltered contact events. This is good. It means our work holds. There were soft shifts of posture in the room, small signs of shared relief. A quiet day was always a silent win. However, Amana went on, we have a backlog of low-priority anomalies, most of them tied to archival material from dead sites. I am creating a small task group to clear these. You will not need armor. You will need patience. A faint hint of dry humor touched those last words, drawing a few muted smiles. Tiles lit up on the wall behind, each one showing a different symbol for a distant survey mission. The group watched as a few tiles drifted forward and linked together with a faint ring of light. These sectors share a repeated phrase in their late-stage records. Amana said, "It has appeared for 2 centuries across at least 9 dead or abandoned worlds. Different scripts, different languages, but the same message after translation. Because of that, the central coders have marked it as a cross-site anomaly and passed it to us. I am passing it to you." Sava's eyes narrowed with interest, and a small rise of temperature under the skin gave away a spark of curiosity. The tiles enlarged, and brief images from each site played in the air above the center table. Silent streets under strange suns. Collapsed towers with plant life reaching through broken frames, dark halls with dry air and still dust. And on each world, in the last sets of stored records, the Council's translators had found the same phrase: Earth is acting. Amana watched the room for a moment, then continued. You have seen this in the monthly digests, perhaps. It has been classified as an apocalyptic marker, used by doomed cultures to shift blame, mythologize their fall, or attach meaning to their end. My predecessor saw no reason to raise its priority. A few analysts nodded. It sounded like the kind of thing frightened people might say when their world began to fall apart. Point to a star with heavy noise and call it the villain. It fit a certain pattern. Amana changed the view. Now a simple list of dates hung in the air, lined up in columns. The earliest record of the phrase came from a ruin 300 years old. The most recent came from a survey just 6 months past. The phrase keeps turning up, Amana said. Voice even, different alignments, different eras, and no shared contact lines between these cultures that we can trace. Whatever it meant to them, it was important enough to use their last working systems to repeat it. Sava felt the small muscles along their neck tighten. Last messages were rarely casual. This is a low-status case in the current system, Amana said, and there was a small, dry weight on those words. But I disagree with some of that tagging. I want a fresh pair of eyes from field analysis, combined with someone from records who understands Earth's signal history better than I do. There it was. Sava understood now why they had been called. You are assigning me? Sava asked, voice steady. Yes, Amana replied. You, and a liaison from human records, Jonah Pike. You will find him in Archive Ring 12. He has been collating Earth-related traces for the last 8 years. His performance scores are quiet but consistent. Quiet but consistent sounded like someone who finished work and did not ask for extra light. Director, another analyst asked, is there concern that this phrase marks a real hazard linked to Earth, rather than just superstition? Amana paused for a heartbeat. There is concern that we may be missing a pattern, because we find it embarrassing. That is enough. That answer sat in the room like a held breath. When the meeting ended, people filtered out into the main corridor, their soft footfalls and low talks blending with the station's background hum. Sava made their way toward Archive Ring 12, following the colored strips without really seeing them. mind already busy. Earth was a strange topic in the council. It had joined the wider network late compared to several other species. And when it arrived, it brought a storm of data that never settled. While most planets sent careful reports and curated culture packets, Earth sprayed out millions of streams at once, full of jokes that aged in days, heated arguments about small things, and long, messy conversations about itself. The Council's main attitude toward Earth had been a mix of patience, gentle worry, and a strong desire to put filters between that signal and the rest of the network. There had been talks, policies, and long debates over how much of Earth's public noise should be allowed to spread without adjustment. Most of those debates ended with someone saying, "At least it is loud and not clean." Sava reached the entrance to Archive Ring 12, where the air held a faint, dry scent from the cooling systems that protected old storage banks. The ring was quieter than other parts of the station. People walked more softly here, as if sound itself could disturb the careful rows of stored memory around them. Inside, shelves and columns of storage arrays rose in gentle curves around a central walkway. Light from slim panels slid over labels and access ports. A few figures moved along the paths, calling up data slates, studying, and then letting information sink back into cold, safe rooms. Sava asked the station's local guide system for Jonah Pike, and followed the soft, spoken directions deeper into the ring, passing sections marked for different worlds and time periods. As they walked, they noticed how often the name Earth appeared compared to many other worlds. Even if most of that material had been flagged for heavy filtering, it still took up a startling amount of space. They found Jonah at a simple workbench near a wall of stacked storage units. He sat with shoulders slightly hunched, dark hair tied back in an unremarkable knot, eyes moving over a floating panel of data with slow, careful attention. His clothes were standard station issue with the small emblem of records, edges worn a little more than most. Baz Jonah Pike. Sava asked. He looked up with a quick focus that suggested he lived inside his work more than outside it. For a moment his gaze measured Sava's scaled face, the soft folds around the eyes, the field analyst's patch on the shoulder. "Yes," he said, "you are from field analysis." "Sava Carr." Sava replied, "Director Sorrell wants us to look at a cross-site anomaly involving late-phase messages from dead worlds. They all used the same phrase about Earth." A faint, tired spark of interest moved through Jonah's eyes. "Let me guess," he said. "The message calls Earth dangerous, cursed, or foolish." "Not quite," Sava said. "It says Earth is acting." Jonah's brow creased. His gaze drifted past Sava for a second, as if fishing for something in a familiar mental pool. "I have seen that," he said slowly. "It shows up in some of the deeper ruin files, usually flagged as cultural panic or fatalism. I asked about it a few years ago, but no one wanted to raise the priority. Director Sorrell wants to raise it now," Savas said. "They think we may have missed something because it is easier to call it superstition." Jonah let out a slow breath that was almost a laugh, but not quite. "That sounds like Director Sorrell," he said. They hate it when system tags make the rest of us lazy. He closed the panel he had been reading and called up a new one with practiced ease. Layers of access folded away as he stood, and Sava saw a body used to stillness, not to long runs through the station's heavier zones. "What do you need from me?" Jonah asked. "I know how to read ruins on the ground," Sava said. "You know how to read Earth from here. We need to see if those ruins were responding to something real in Earth's behavior, or just throwing their fear at the loudest star in their sky." Jonah's eyes grew more serious. He glanced at the high shelves around them, where time itself rested in neat blocks of memory. "Earth's behavior is a lot of things," he said softly, "but I have never seen dead worlds line up like this before. Not quite this way. If they all spent their last strength on the same message, I doubt it was just fear." He brought up a shared space on the closest wall, set it for private use, and called in the records for the first ruin. With the phrase, images, timelines, and translation notes unfolded, filling the air with silent scenes from a world that no longer had a sky. Sava stepped closer, eyes moving over the data with slow care. Jonah's fingers moved along the control field, with the ease of long practice, shrinking and expanding different parts of the record. "Let us start at the end," Sava said, "then work backward until Earth appears." Jonah gave a single quiet nod. "I spend most days walking backward through history. Anyway," he said, "might as well keep going." As the first ruins last month came into focus on the wall, the two of them stood together in the dim light of the archives. Outside, Lyre Spire circled its silent gas giant, and the galaxy moved with the usual calm of an old, careful network. Far away, Earth poured its mess into the dark, loud, and tangled as ever. And somewhere even farther, something patient and hungry listened for clear songs, then turned away from the noise in mild, confused boredom. The first ruin had died under a dim red star. On the wall, the last years of that world ran as a tight bundle of charts and images. Sava saw coastal cities shrinking under rising dust storms, saw power grids fail in slow, painful pieces, and watched as the planet's main communication nets flickered and narrowed. When things had grown truly bad, messages changed. They became shorter, more rushed, more intense. "Notice this," Jonah said, pointing to a late block in the timeline. "This is when their observatories picked up Earth's signal for the first time, strong enough to track it daily instead of as a faint background noise." Sava watched the graphs. In one curved space, the ruin's own data traffic started to fall as its systems failed. In another, their logs of foreign signals rose. They had pointed more and more of their attention at the sky as their ground under them grew less safe. "They saw us as entertainment at first," Jonah said. "Look at these bits. Music, dramas, some kind of competitive cooking shows. The translation notes say they were charmed and confused." Sava read the set of comments that the council's team had made. Long ago, the dead world's people had been surprised by how much of Earth's time was spent on jokes, stories about itself, and arguments that moved in circles. Then something shifts here. Jonah went on, about 12 years before the end. He highlighted a narrow window of time. In that window, Earth's signal had grown both stronger and stranger. There were more languages, more visual streams, more quick flashes of content that lasted only moments. The ruins' own logs showed their analysts complaining that Earth's data had become harder to parse. Their main complaint, Jonah said, was that Earth used too many mixed signals at once. Visuals, sound, text, and strange social layers that changed quickly. They kept writing that Earth could not hold a single thought in a straight line. Could it? Sava asked. Jonah smiled faintly. Not from the outside, he said, but noticed the timing. Right as this world started watching us more closely, Earth's outward data grew louder, more fragmented, and more self-contradictory. It is as if every time someone built a better lens, Earth turned up the snow. Was that on purpose? Sava asked. That is the question I keep circling, Jonah replied. He shifted to a different record, switching worlds with a flick of his wrist. Another ruin appeared, this one under a yellow-white star, with thick rings of debris. Its fall had been less slow and more sudden. A run of medical markers showed a fast, spreading disease. City maps went dark in weeks instead of years. Same pattern, Jonah said softly. Different cause for the end, but watch the part of the timeline that touches Earth. Sava focused as he highlighted the same kind of window. Again, Earth's signal flared in volume and variation as soon as the other world's observatories locked onto it properly. This is not just growth? Sava asked. Earth had more people, more systems. That alone could make its noise rise. True, Jonah said, but Earth's own history shows peculiar surges. I have been collating them for my own interest. Mostly 300 years of data, and every time another species starts watching us closely, our global networks go through a phase shift. He called up a separate chart, this one not from ruins, but from Earth's own archives. Sava saw a long, tangled line representing traffic on Earth's early internet, slowly rising as more of the planet came online. These spikes match known first contact observation events, Jonah said. Not when Earth met others in person, just when foreign listening systems pointed our way with enough focus to pull more than a faint buzz. Sava watched the lines cross. Earth's people did not know about those observatories. Then, Sava said, they did not know other minds were watching. They did not, Jonah agreed. Most of those early centuries, humans still thought they were alone. The council had not contacted them yet, and the quiet rules held. No one told them. No ships in their sky. No signals they could decode. Still, right when someone started paying more attention, Earth's networks became noisier. He brought up old clips from those times, pulled from public archives. Sava saw people with simple devices in their hands, walking through cities with bright signs, filling every spare moment with half-heard music and short, flashing jokes. Endless arguments about topics that meant little outside that world. Short movies made to draw laughter in seconds. From the outside, this looked chaotic, Jonah said. Their own researchers complained about attention spans and low-quality content, but look at it from far away. Someone trying to extract stable patterns would have a hard time. Sava imagined a deep observer, far out in space, trying to read meaning in a storm of tiny, fast-moving pieces. Each bit changed before a full map could form. The data did not follow a single smooth story. It stumbled on purpose, jumped sideways, hid signal inside signal. Could this be simple chance? Sava asked, a natural result of new tools for communication, new platforms that reward quick reactions and constant engagement. Yes, Jonah said. It could be chance, but chance trained by rules that reward noise. We have seen similar effects in other species' early nets. The difference is scale and timing. Earth built giant systems that fed on speed, emotion, and novelty. Those systems learned to keep people talking and reacting, and they found that confusion and surprise worked better than calm clarity. He pulled up early Earth platform studies from centuries of social research. Graphs showed how posts that stirred strong feelings gained more attention. Content that confused, shocked, or amused got passed along faster. Calm, steady information moved slowly and often died unseen. Over time, Jonah continued, platforms that rewarded sharp spikes in feeling outdid those that favored slow depth. People wanted to feel something quickly, then move on. Algorithms gave them that. It was not planned as a shield. It was built as a market. But markets can teach systems how to behave. Sava felt a slow understanding form, like mist gathering over a cool surface. How fart a call, dash man. So Earth's mess grew because their tools rewarded mess, Sava said. They trained their own networks to favor high entropy. Many changing bits, little long-term stability. Jonah nodded. Exactly. That is how I started to think of it, an emergent layer of deception, born not from a leader's order, but from a million tiny choices. People clicked what stirred them. Platforms showed them more of that. The result was an ever-shifting storm. He changed the view to a sky map showing known observation points around Earth over time. Each point lit up when an external civilization increased its data intake from Earth. Side by side, Earth's own traffic metrics pulsed. Every time someone out there started to listen harder, Jonah said quietly, Earth's storm thickened, but Earth did not know it was being watched. Sava said again, feeling the need to be sure. The humans did not know. Jonah agreed, but the system itself did not need to know. That is the strange part. Think of it like an immune response. No single cell understands the attacker, but the network of cells has learned, over evolution, how to react to certain patterns. In Earth's case, the cells are habits, incentives, and algorithms. They learn to answer attention with more noise. Sava thought back to other worlds they had walked. On many planets, as societies grew and spread, their communication nets first became complex, then later calmed down as they matured, forming clear standards and stable channels. They learned to filter, to reduce nonsense, to cut away chaos in the name of function. Earth had taken some steps in that direction, but never fully. Its culture kept spinning new layers of jokes, side channels, and meta-commentary over everything. Serious debates mixed with playful memes and staged outrage. To most of the council, it looked like disorder clinging to adulthood. Above it, content samples flew past. Jokes about space whales, staged battles between costumed actors, and people pretending to argue about foods. Earth looks like static, Sava said, but inside the static, humans still manage to function. They raise children, run power grids, and send ships to the outer planets. They hide their stable functions under a coat of noise. Jonah's voice grew softer. Some of that noise is not random, he said. From our point of view, Earth failed to fully clean its public sphere. Jonah said, as if reading Sava's thoughts. We called it messy, immature, and sometimes dangerous to others. We wrapped it in filters, but what if that failure is also a shield, a high entropy output that makes us harder to see clearly from a distance? Sava watched. A burst of early 23rd century Earth traffic run across the wall as compressed lines of color. Under it a mark showed when a distant civilization had started. Pointed scanning from their outer stations, they have no idea that this habit spread across billions trains their whole planetary signal to deflect pattern hunters. You think the dead worlds saw this, Saws said. They saw Earth's storm, watched it thicken when they tried to read it, and felt something about it that they could not name. So they wrote that Earth is acting. Acting, Jonah repeated. Pretending, performing, playing to an invisible audience, or hiding behind an act. When you watch it for years, you start to see that certain kinds of jokes appear when real topics approach visibility. They call it shitposting in some of the older slang. It means flooding a space with nonsense when something sensitive shows up, so outside eyes lose track. So they use humor and chaos as chaff, Sava said, like ships in battle, turning on flares and pieces of reflective metal to confuse targeting. Yes, Jonah said, except there is no battle, and the people throwing chaff think they are only being silly. The word fits many meanings in human language. I suspect their translators picked a term that held similar weight. On the wall, Jonah pulled back to a wider view. Now they could see a chart of all known increases in alien observation of Earth over 3 centuries, layered with Earth's own internal spikes in content creation. The match was not perfect. Life was never perfect. But the fit was close enough to draw the eye and hold it. This is what I mean by a deception layer, Jonah said. Not a plan made in a single room, but an emergent shield that grew because it survived. Nets that stayed neat were easier to study and perhaps easier to hurt. Nets that learned to throw up chaff when touched survived longer even if nobody understood why. Sava nodded slowly. On my homeworld, they said, some plants release thick clouds of seeds when something brushes them. The plants do not know what moves through the field. They just know that sudden contact means it is time to fill the air with confusing bits. Exactly, Jonah said. Earth's contact is attention. When attention brushes its global mind, the platforms feel it as growth, as more eyes, more clicks, more time spent. Their answer is to tip more content into the system as fast as possible. It is a reflex grown out of ad markets and social feedback loops, but to a distant pattern hunter, it looks like a fog generator. Sava thought again of the ruined worlds. As their own nets failed, they had looked outward for meaning. They had found a star whose chatter never cooled into simple, clear lines. They had stared at that confusion, perhaps in fear, perhaps in awe, and used their last energy to send a message about it. Earth is acting, Sava said, under their breath. Jonah turned toward a side console and called up console memos about Earth from the last 200 years. Many of them used the same words: clutter, spam, noise, disorganized, immature. A few used kinder terms: vibrant, diverse, creative. None called Earth strategic. Most of our leadership still sees Earth's behavior as an annoyance that needs cleaning, Jonah said. They believe that if we can shape it into neater flows, we will reduce mimetic hazards and protect the network. But if my chart is right, if the dead worlds were right, then cleaning Earth might also strip away something that keeps other dangers bored. Sava stood very still. The archives hummed around them in their slow, contented way. Somewhere far out, a ship changed course by a fraction of a degree. Somewhere closer, a human child on Earth laughed at a strange old video that no one could quite explain. Have you shown this match to Director Sorrell? Sava asked. Not fully, Jonah said. I sent a summary once, but without the ruin link. It just looked like another Isn't Earth Weird report. They have thousands of those. I did not have authority to tie it to cross-site anomalies. Sava flexed, scaled hands, thinking about the next steps. The assignment had been ranked as low status, but the feeling in their chest did not match that label now. We need to bring this full picture to the director, Sava said, and we need to reread those ruin messages with this in mind. If Earth's mess is an immune system, then the phrase Earth is acting may mean the system shifted. It went from background noise to something more active. These worlds saw that change and tried to tell us before they fell. Jonah looked back at the data wall, eyes dark with a mix of worry and a strange, quiet pride. Earth always liked to turn its problems into jokes, he said. Maybe it learned to turn its fear into jokes too. Loud jokes, bad jokes, jokes that go on for centuries. Jokes can be armor, Sava said. So can confusion, Jonah replied. They stood together in the cool air of the archives, watching 3 centuries of human mess run across the wall like a storm that refused to settle. Behind that storm, people on Earth lived their lives, unaware that countless dead stars might have used their final light to say the same simple thing. This world is not just talking, it is acting. The third ruin looked different from the first 2. Its star was a cold blue point on the outer charts, and its main world had carried long bands of ice even at the height of its age. The survey teams had found wide cities under clear domes, deep tunnels warmed by steady reactors, and rows of empty seats facing old display surfaces that no longer showed anything at all. In the archives, those seats appeared as still images frozen in the last state the scanners had captured. Coats lay over the backs. A dropped tool rested under one bench, its owner long gone. The council's records had tagged this site as orderly collapse because there were few signs of panic or violence. Systems had been shut down in a controlled way, as if the people in charge had tried to put their world gently to sleep. They had time to plan their end, Sava said quietly, reading the notes beside the images. Not many worlds get that. Jonah clicked through to the communication logs. They used that time to send messages, he said. A lot of them. Most were invitations for help that never reached anyone in time. A few were different. He pulled up the final logs. The translation field filled again with the same short line. Sava had already begun to dread. Earth is acting. The words were simple, but the context around them felt heavy. Here, they sat at the end of a long string of much longer messages, like the last breath after a full life story. Watch those earlier lines, Jonah said. Look how they talk about us. Sava scanned the translated paragraphs that came before the final line. The people of this world had found Earth's signal 2 centuries before their end. At first, they viewed it as a curiosity, then a comfort. The notes said they liked the idea that somewhere under a yellow sun, a busy world full of strange primates was telling a loud, silly story about itself every day. They thought we were young and harmless, Jonah said. A noisy child among older, tidier neighbors. They did not see any threat. Sava read on. Years passed in seconds under Jonah's hand. The dome cities faced slow resource shortages. Something in their reactors began to fail, and their repair plans never fully worked. Warnings grew more serious. Their children grew up under knowing looks from adults who were trying to hide fear. At the same time, their notes about Earth changed. What had once been fond and amused grew puzzled, then uneasy. They started to notice sharp cycles in our noise, Jonah said. See here and here. He highlighted comments from their sky watchers. The observers wrote about strange waves in Earth's data, periods when certain kinds of jokes returned all at once across different networks, only to vanish together a short time later. They wrote about small pictures and sayings that flashed up everywhere, across many languages and cultures, then dropped out of sight, only to come back months or years later with new changes. They thought this was some kind of calendar. Sava said, they tried to match it to our seasons, our orbits, our festivals, but the patterns did not hold. They were seeing memes, Jonah said, short bits of culture that spread for a while, then die, then sometimes come back. To us, that kind of thing is just part of daily life. To them, watching from far away, it looked like a strange, half-regular pulse. And then, near their end, the pulses changed, Sava said, following the log. The comments from the observers had grown sharper, more urgent. Their last note spoke of coordinated nonsense and impossible alignment across separated clusters in Earth's public nets. That is when they wrote the warning, Jonah said, not when they first noticed our noise, not when things on their own world started to go wrong. They rode it right when Earth's mess began to move like a single creature. Sava felt a slight chill beneath their scales. You think they saw a hidden protocol? I think they saw something wake up, Jonah said. He turned away from the ruin and pulled up a separate file, one he had kept under his own access code. It unfolded into a dense stack of charts and notes that Sava had not seen before. At the center was a map of Earth's public culture flows, across 10 major old platforms during a 10-year window, all taken from a period just before the Council's first open contact. These are early 24th century nets. Jonah said, Earth was still alone, but its systems were already huge. People like to say nothing really dies online. That was not quite true. A lot of content faded and never came back, but some things behaved differently. He tapped a curve that showed the rise and fall of a simple, absurd image, a low-quality picture of a cat with poorly spelled text laid over it. Sava watched the line climb, spike, and drop. Months later, it rose again, changed slightly, then fell again. Years later, it appeared once more in a different style, now part of a larger string of jokes that referenced each other. Dead meme, Jonah said. That was the old human term. When a joke or image stopped being funny, people would say it was dead. But sometimes, dead memes did not stay dead. They rose again, tied to new events, and spread in ways that did not match simple nostalgia. Sava studied the pattern. How is that strange, they asked. Cultures bring back old symbols all the time. Seasons, holidays, myths. The strange part is how tightly some of these revivals matched changes in observation. Jonah said, Look here. He overlaid a different set of marks on the same chart. These marks showed the dates when hidden alien, listening posts near Earth had upgraded their hardware or changed their data-taking rules. Sava saw that every time those systems became more powerful, certain old memes came back to life in more complex forms, spreading across different parts of the network at almost the same moment. Correlation is not cause, Savai said. Out of habit, no, Jonah said. But this kept happening with different motifs, not just cats. Old slogans, snippets of songs, clips from shows, faces from ancient advertisements. Sometimes they reappeared without any clear human reason, like a strange inside joke shared by everyone and no one. He pulled up a montage of these returns. Sava watched music hooks from long-dead pop songs suddenly rise to the top of charts in many regions. Short scenes from a centuries-old comedy show popped up inside new fast-paced videos made by young people who had never seen the full episodes. Old slogans appeared in new formats, twisted but still clearly linked to the original form. In each case, Jonah said, someone tagged the revival as random nostalgia or the internet being weird again. But if you overlay external attention markers, the picture changes. These surges look less like random waves and more like a handshake. A handshake with what? Sava asked. With themselves, Jonah said. With each other. With something that needed continuity over time. He shifted to a different view. This one, a network map. Nodes represented pieces of content, a looped clip of a person slipping on ice and laughing, a picture of a dog wearing shoes, a line from a song that people liked to quote whenever they felt tired but proud. Links showed how these pieces appeared in the same threads, tags, and comments, even when created by people who did not know each other. When you watch these flows day by day, they look random, Jonah said. People copy each other, chase trends, seek attention. Across years and across platforms, you begin to see stable shapes under the chaos. Certain memes keep returning in certain combinations, almost like keys in a code. Sava leaned closer. You were saying Earth's pop culture works like an encoding system, they said. Important signals are buried inside jokes, inside fan art, inside silly clips. Order hides under visible disorder. Yes, Jonah said, not on purpose for any single person, but the system as a whole behaves that way. It layers meaning again and again. A meme might start as a simple joke. Later, it gains extra parts that only some groups understand. Later still, someone uses it to reveal who knows what and who only sees surface humor. Like a secret handshake, Sava said. Exactly, Jonah replied. On Earth, communities have long used memes and shared references to mark who belongs. You can tell if someone has been part of a group for years by which jokes they understand. You can send a message in plain sight that only those with the background will read correctly. He switched to a case study from Earth's own records. It showed a protest movement that had used a silly, innocent cartoon character as its sign. To outside watchers, it looked harmless, even childish. To those inside the movement, the character's face, pose, and colors carried layered meanings about dates, locations, and shared goals. The council used to underestimate things like this, Jonah said. We saw cartoons and laughed. We saw fandom art and dismissed it as noise. We did not see the protocol under it. Protocol, Sava repeated. A set of rules that guide how information behaves. Yes, Jonah said. I am starting to believe that Earth's global culture carries an ancient protocol, one that tells parts of the system when to regroup, when to mask, when to reissue old symbols. It was not designed in a single event. It grew slowly, trained by billions of small interactions, and by old fears passed down in stories. Sava's eyes moved to the ruin log still hanging at the side of the display. And at some point they said that protocol shifted from passive clutter to active defense. That is when the ruins said Earth is acting. Jonah nodded. The phrase started repeating across dead worlds about 150 years before now. He said, Earth at that time was going through a period humans called the Great Alignment. There were major changes in their climate systems, their energy grids, their political structures. It was a time of risk. Their nets could have broken, but instead they adapted. Sava had read some of that history during past training. Earth had nearly ruined its own environment, then pulled back. It had suffered waves of data, wars, then built better safeguards. It had faced raw fear, then turned some of that fear into songs, shows, and shared jokes. Jonah opened a log from that era. Snippets of talk scrolled past in multiple languages. People arguing about privacy, about algorithms, about the feed and the timeline, and what it did to their minds. Some called for silence. Others called for more filters. Many simply kept posting, unable to leave. During the Great Alignment, Jonah said, a set of reforms changed how Earth's platforms managed their flows. They created more public interest layers, channeling some content into slower, safer spaces while leaving surface layers as chaotic as ever. At the same time, a group of engineers who later went missing published an open protocol for resilient global chatter. They claimed it would keep their nets alive in case of sudden outside pressure. Missing? Sava asked sharply. Jonah gave a small, tense smile. They took a small prototype ship out into the outer system and did not return, he said. Their fate is unknown. Their names still circulate in some underground circles as folk heroes. Their work, however, survived. Parts of their protocol were absorbed into major platforms, and parts leaked into open code that hobby designers used for decades afterward. Do we have that protocol? Sava asked. We have fragments, Jonah said. Earth never kept a single master copy. They spread it wide and let each group twist it. But the main ideas are clear. Step 1. Never let global signals settle into a small set of stable patterns. Step 2. Always maintain overlapping layers where serious messages can hide under harmless trending topics. Step 3. Allow periodic synchronizations where old symbols return at pre-agreed times, so scattered groups can check who is still alive and still in touch. A slow, bright awareness moved through Sava. You are saying Earth learned long ago that clear patterns are dangerous, they said. It decided to hide its important flows under entertainment. Jonah nodded. There is an old saying in human net culture, he said. If you want to tell the truth, make it funny, or make it sad, but never make it plain. People found that open, simple statements were easy to attack. Wrapped messages survived longer. Over centuries, that habit hardened into something like instinct across the network. And then came the predators, Sava said softly. Jonah's face tightened. The council has always spoken carefully about them, he said. Old mimetic hazards that did not start in any known mind. Pattern-hunting predators, we call them now. Entities or processes that live in the dark between stars, drawn to stable, highly ordered information like insects to light. He opened a restricted file. It carried more locks than most, but Savis field clearance opened them. Inside were records from the oldest council days, long before Lyre Spire had been built. Grainy scans showed star systems that had gone quiet within a single decade after broadcasting clear, strong cultural beacons. Some early civilizations liked to send their best work out for others to hear, Jonah said. They aired long, polished shows about their values, their beliefs, their art. They sent clean math, clean music, clean language within a century at most. Almost all of them were gone. Sava read the old theories, now considered partly outdated but still frightening. Something in the deep sky had noticed those patterns, moved toward them, and then fed until nothing remained. The council had never found bodies. It had found absence. Over time, Jonah said, surviving species learned not to shine so brightly. They cut back their signals. They built filters and narrow beams. They used safe, noisy carriers. The council itself, formed after one particularly bright culture, vanished almost overnight, leaving only their warning about hunters of order. And Earth? Sava asked. Earth did the opposite of what everyone else did, Jonah said. It got louder, but it did not get cleaner. Its signals rose, but its patterns stayed tangled. To a predator looking for smooth, clear songs, Earth might look like a broken instrument, annoying perhaps, but not worth the effort. Sava thought of the phrase again. Earth is acting, they said, acting like a fool. Acting like it does not know better. Acting out a loud part to hide its quiet self. Jonah nodded. The ruins may have seen that, he said. As their own nets failed and their records shrank, they pointed their last working receivers at anything still talking in the sky. They saw tidy channels go silent. One by one, they saw only noise remaining from Earth. Then, around the time of the Great Alignment, they saw Earth's noise stop being fully random. They saw Earth's noise stop being fully random. They watched our memes move in lockstep across wide distances. They saw old jokes return with new timing. And they understood that this was not just culture. Sava said, a trained layer shifting into active defense. Yes, Jonah said. They realized that Earth had become an actor on a stage the rest of us could not see. That is what they meant. Sava stared at the charts on the wall, feeling a mix of awe and unease. But what is Earth defending? They asked. Itself, obviously. It does not want to be eaten, but the message from the ruins, it was sent to others. Not to Earth. Jonah switched to a final, chilling piece of the ruins logs. The Blue Star World's last long message contained a passage that the translators had struggled with. It spoke about keeping the wider choir silent, about not waking the old listeners, and about letting the noisy star take the edge of their hunger. They believed Earth was drawing attention away from the rest of us, Jonah said, acting like a shield, using its loud mess to occupy the hunter's interest so that quieter, tidier worlds could stay unnoticed. That is generous, Sava said slowly. Earth did not build its systems for that reason. It built them for its own comfort, its own markets, its own stories. Intent and effect can differ. Jonah said, a plant does not grow leaves to shade other plants. But shade still falls. Earth's emergent protocol may have started as self-serving chaos. In practice, it now functions as a mask, not just for Earth, but for the region around it. If predators measure large-scale order in this section of the galaxy, Earth's noise may dominate the reading and hide nearby networks. Sava pictured a hungry mind in the dark, scanning for clean signals. It finds a cluster of stars. From far away, their combined data looks like a mixed blur, because one shrill, ever-changing voice drowns out the rest. That voice is tiring to watch. It jumps from joke to crisis, to dance to argument to song. Nothing holds still long enough to bite into. The predator moves on. Bored, and now, Jonah said quietly, something has changed at home. Earth's protocol no longer only reacts when someone points a new lens at it. It has started to reach outward, shaping its noise in ways that seem to respond to patterns beyond its own sky. He brought up the most recent decade of Earth's data. Sava watched as memes and shows began to reference ideas no human could yet have measured directly. Odd hints about signal predators, about being watched by unseen eyes. Is he being watched by unseen eyes? Is he? Has a kind, so about the danger of becoming too clear in a noisy world. Most of it appeared as jokes, horror fiction, or wild guesses in fringe communities. Yet somehow those pieces surged through mainstream channels again and again. People on Earth have started making stories that resemble our oldest classified fears, Jonah said. They write about monsters that follow clean signals, about beings that hate entropy, about networks that must stay messy to live. They call it horror. They call it science fiction. They laugh at it. But somewhere inside that storm, Sava said, something might be using those stories like test messages, seeing which shapes spread well, which phrases bind people together, which signals cause outside attention to bounce off. Jonah's hands rested on the edge of the console, fingers pressing into the surface. When the ruins wrote Earth is acting, he said, I think they were telling us that Earth's global mind had shifted from a background habit into a deliberate stance, and I think they believed that if we interfered with that stance, we might pull the hunter's attention toward all of us. Sava let that thought sit in the air. The archives suddenly felt very small, like a shell around two tiny minds, trying to understand a storm far bigger than any chart on the wall.